eukaryotic cell are being used by this bacteria to do an extra amount of ATP synthesis, and now we have a situation where they both begin to benefit from this association. So at this point, this is a mutualism, and I'd probably call this a facultative mutualism, because the bacteria is still capable of living on its own, and the cell is capable of living on its own as well. It's just they do better together. Okay, now, over evolutionary time, the genes that are present in this circular DNA within this bacterium and the genes within the DNA within the nucleus of this eukaryotic cell, we get at some point some deletions, and that removes particular types of functions from these two cell types. But it turns out it's okay. If the eukaryotic cell loses the ability to make lots of ATP, well, that's all right. The bacteria does the ATP synthesis. And if the bacteria here loses the ability to make particular compounds, or it loses enzymes through deletion of DNA that are important for metabolic processes, maybe it loses the ability to make transfer RNAs, or etc., it's okay because the eukaryotic cell does those things for it. So over evolutionary time, we have modification of the nuclear DNA of the eukaryote to strip out some of these functions that are done by the bacterium. And the bacterium is losing genes that are necessary for certain functions, but that's okay because the eukaryotic cell performs these functions for the bacterium. So as we move forward through evolutionary time, we begin to get something that is no longer a bacteria, right? It can't survive on its own, right? And now we don't even call it a bacterium. We probably call this a mitochondrion. The mitochondrion has a lot of DNA that's very similar to a group of oxidative phosphorylation bacteria, but they're missing all kinds of genes that are necessary for this bacteria to survive. Right? We're missing all of these important genes to the point where we are today, where this thing is not even recognizable as an organism anymore. We don't even think of it that way. We think of it as an organelle. It's similar in sequence to bacterium, but it no longer does many of the things that bacteria do because all of these functions have been lost in favor of what the eukaryote can do for the mitochondrion and vice versa. Okay? Right? The current mitochondrion is a shell of what it used to be. Then we think that in another lineage of these eukaryotic cells that had these bacteria within them, they picked up another one, right? So we still have the nucleus here with the DNA. I've got my little mitochondrion, and now in here I also have this thing called a chloroplast today, but it started out as a photosynthetic bacteria that was picked up, and it's undergone a similar process as well of over evolutionary time losing particular genes, losing functions that were duplicated by the nucleus, and vice versa, until within the plant and the photosynthetic protist lineage, you have this chloroplast that again we call an organelle. It's not an organism anymore. So in some cases, moving through this commensalism to mutualism, we can go even further and get these structures that we don't even consider to be living, right? Organelles are parts of cells. They're not considered to be alive. The cell is alive, but the parts aren't. We consider chloroplasts and mitochondria to be organelles, non-living, even though they descended most likely from living cells. Just a couple more minutes here. This theory that we're doing here was presented by Lynn Margulis, endosymbiotic and it's referred to as endosymbiotic theory. All right, so I'll see you next time.
Bye.